Okay, I'll call this Plan Commission meeting for February 11th, 2019 to order. Roll call, please.
Chris Zellner.
Here.
Sue Springman. Joe Zitzelberger.
Here.
Brad Zeman.
Here.
Brian Malish. Tim Black.
Here.
Chris Thomas.
Here. Okay, first thing we have is minutes. Anybody like anything pulled off them or look for a motion?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Joe Zitzelberger, second by Tim Black. Any other comments? Call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Let's have it. Public comment. Is there anyone here who'd like to make a comment on something that's not on the agenda for this evening? Yes, please.
My name is Ann Lewandowski, and I live at 103 West 3rd Street. As you guys are discussing the Hy-Vee project this evening, I would be very interested to know, because we do have two competing interests for grocery stores, how that decision in terms of which will be favored or approved over the other will actually be made. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Kevin, do you want to let everybody know about the sand that was placed?
Yes, there is, there's a mixture of a sand with a limestone in it that's available for all residents for putting down on their sidewalks. So if you have icy sidewalks, we made it available. There's a pile of it over at Centennial Park. We just ask that you bring your own shovel and your own container, 5-gallon bucket or whatever else to haul it. And then we'd ask that you limit the use to just the sidewalks.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Silver? Yeah.
Okay. New business. First item on the agenda, discuss and take action on the site plan for BKG Properties, 1091 Unique Drive, Waunakee Business Park. Kevin, are you?
First, I'd like to do is have a presentation by the developer if they're ready, and then we can follow that up with some staff comments.
Good evening. I'm Scott Schruel with Frieding Associates, general contractor based up in Reedsburg. And this is Brent Greiber with RG Heating. And what we have before you this evening is a proposal to construct approximately a 15,000 square foot new service center for RG Heating, and out on lot 25. And we're looking to do it later on this spring.
Thanks, Scott. Like I said, my name is Brent Greiber. Along with my wife, Kelsey, who's in the back of the room, we own RG Heating and Air Conditioning. Fortunate enough to recognize or know a lot of you guys here, and I can just give you, for those of you who don't know, just a real quick overview. So we're a local company, been in Waunakee since 1974, and kind of serve 3 different areas. Service, replacement, and new construction in both the residential and spaces. And like I said, company's been in existence since 1974. Kind of fast forward to today. Kelsey and I purchased the company in October of 2017, so about 16 months ago. Have kind of been growing and expanding, and got to the point about a year ago we started talking with Scott that the building kind of was going to be our next need, and brings us here today in front of this group. So thank you.
Beyond that, I guess we've shared some of the possible. We're kind of jumping around. I should back up and say we had a chance when we first started talking about planning this building. I've had a chance to meet with Ed a couple of times to try and get some architectural thoughts and make sure that the building is consistent with what you have in the industrial park. They've presented you with a number of imagery, kind of give you a feel for what this building will look like as you work your way around from Unique Drive, and if someone can kind of page through a page or two here. Again, from the opposite corner, and from the street. Straight on. A couple of things, just trying to make sure that we're carrying the building and giving it a real strong foundation, both at the foundation level and then also on the corners of the building. The material that we're using, we're proposing to use an insulated metal panel. So again, it's not the typical corrugated metal and the like. Actually, if you grab it. So it actually is a textured panel. It'll give the feeling more of a almost like a tilt-up type concrete type feel, and interspersing the colors to try and again create interest, and also to give ourselves a little bit of variation to be able to punch those windows and make things work for it. Next elevation. Again, down the right side, what we're looking at is again, the office in the front. Obviously, it is a service center for the heating company, and so lots of service vehicles, or not lots, but you've got about eight service techs that are in and out with their vehicles, and then a truck dock on the southwest corner of the building. The opposite side of the building, again, each of the doors are drive-through so that the service vehicles can get all the way through, load themselves up, and then proceed right on through the building and out the other entrance. Kind of give you a feel of perspective from down the street from the brewery, kind of what you'd see from that side. And then an aerial. Again, what we're looking at is, again, two curb cuts, about 12 parking spaces for general public and like up front. We did provide, and Tracy, I don't know if that was something that was able to be supplied to folks, but last week we did, there was from the review minutes, there were some inconsistencies in the material we provided you in terms of how many parking spaces we were looking for. The updated plan, we now are showing that we're looking to have 26 parking spaces on here to come close to meeting the requirements that Kent and the folks at Strand had indicated we need. When you folks move in the fall, you actually will have how many employees?
A little over 20, 22 to 24-ish would be kind of the max.
And of those, again, service center?
Yeah, I mean, 7 to 8 of those are stopping in the day, vans that are in and then out. So, I mean, it's not, I wouldn't say that'd be indicative of how many parking spaces we need by any stretch of the imagination, but more of a sense of kind of staff.
So what we're actually asking then is for the site plan to be approved with the 26 parking spaces and 25 conventional and the one handicap spot. Just a couple more. So again, architect on the project is Menti Engineering. The imagery we're using a local designer to kind of give us help to try and make sure we're capturing kind of the look and the feel of what they do. Again, the idea being that we've got room enough for the semi traffic that they have coming in on the east side of the building, come around the back side, queue into the parking, into the semi dock, and then be able to work directly back out onto the road. We actually submitted today, I think, Kevin, I think you probably might have seen things this afternoon. We've been working with Quantum Engineering on all the stormwater, erosion control and the like, and so those documents are moving their way through both the state and for you folks for approval. This really better articulates the parking spaces. Again, parking lot up front, curved area around it, and then basically interspersing additional parking between the doors that we have all the way around the building. Correspondingly, then the landscape plan, trying to meet the points and creating a number of trees as a part of this, some additional shrubbery, and then some foundation plantings. I think that's it. Yeah.
Okay. There's just a couple comments. First one is the parking. As he indicated, there's 31 stalls required. They're proposing 26. Kent did point out to me that if you have over 25, there are 2 ADA requirements in terms of the parking. And the way we've handled these requests in the past is we grant a parking exception as long as they can demonstrate they have room to add the additional 5, and they certainly have the room to add additional parking stalls if needed. And we put a condition on there that if the parking becomes necessary in the village's perspective, and it's a sole discretion on the village if there's on-street parking or there's people parking outside of parking stalls, that we have the right to require the additional parking spots to go in. From an environmental standpoint, it's certainly our preference not to overbuild, asphalt parking lots. It's our preference to have them build what they think they're going to need, as long as they can demonstrate that they have adequate space going forward if it's demonstrated that those parking stalls are needed. Kent said we should make sure that there's a railing on the loading dock, which I think we can follow up at a staff level. And then there's, were you guys able to identify where the garbage and recycling be handled, and then the rooftop mechanicals?
Yeah, I really no rooftop mechanicals. There won't be a traditional rooftop unit. Would be radiant from a heating standpoint, and then more of a split system for cooling. And then I would envision kind of the recycling and trash to be in the rear. Not facing, I know we're not showing that, but that's kind of what I've always envisioned and where we'd see that fitting best.
At the staff level, we would typically require, an enclosure, so there'd be some sort of trash and recycling enclosure that we can review. Consider that can be a condition of approval, and it's included as part of my notes. Landscaping meets the points, and the stormwater calculations, like we said, they were submitted today, so that would be a condition of approval as well. So the recommended motion is, to approve the site plan conditionally with, one, there's no signage that's been submitted, so that'll have to be approved at a later plan commission meeting. The dumpster will have to be properly approved by at the staff level, and then a parking exception as provided as in the past, where they're required to put them in if the buildings that they're required.
Kevin, I think Kent's got that too. If you look at page 8 of 98, he's got a paragraph that starts, "We are not sure," when he's talking about the parking, and the last sentence, I think, gets at what you were talking about. Especially the last phrase, potentially having additional parking.
Sure, that's fine, thanks.
Is there enough room on the backside for that garbage enclosure with the way it's designed?
Yeah.
Easily.
Yes, okay. Questions from any of the plan commissioners?
How many employees?
Right now, we have 22.
So there'll be 22 employees at the site
Yes.
at any one time. So 22 cars plus then customer vehicles too?
I guess I would be careful to say 22 cars, because a good chunk of the employees that we have drive a company-owned vehicle to the shop maybe in the morning, pull in, load up, and then
Gotcha.
leave. So there's, I would say almost half of our employees kind of have that setup.
Okay.
Customer facing or customer interaction in our office is actually relatively minimal. Someone dropping off a bill, picking up a filter, something like that. So, less kind of customer interaction from that standpoint.
Any other questions?
Architecturally, it looks pretty neutral. I mean, Ed, your team, I mean,
Yeah, no, I think they made a substantial effort to break down the massing and the variety of the side and the administration versus the warehousing. I think they tried to do a nice job, and the materials are quality materials.
is there any concern with the egress, with the intersection in front of it at all, or?
I don't think Ken had any comments, and the through movements and everything reduce a lot of turning movements in the parking before they go through the building. And in terms of the parking, it was based on warehousing ratio and office, not retail. So it's 1 per 300 versus 5 per 1,000, yeah.
Brett, you want to share how long your company's been in existence?
Sure. So, since 1974, my grandpa actually started it with about him and 2 of his sons. We've been in the same location on West Street for over 40 years. And I actually asked this just the other day. They started out with actually sharing that with 2 or 3 other companies, and we now use every square inch and then some. So it's kind of the impetus for us being here today. So I like to think we've been a kind of a fixture in the community for a while, and had the opportunity to serve a lot of you, which we definitely don't take for granted.
I would agree. Do you know what you're going to do with the West Street building at this point?
I don't, and that's owned through a different entity, through someone else, so TBD at this point.
Good. I think the building looks nice. It fits well for the industrial park.
Mm-hmm.
So,
It's our hope to begin as soon as whenever spring gets here. And then be complete later on this fall, so that they can transition as we get into November, December from the other facility to this facility.
just to make sure they meet all of our requirements for the park, correct? Yes?
And the enclosure. trash
As soon
enclosures.
as they include, yes, with those exceptions we noted. Okay. I have nothing further. If there's anybody who'd like to make a motion at this point?
I'll make a motion to approve site plan for BKG Properties, 1091 Unique Drive, with the conditions that the good fellow to my left pointed out on parking and other things.
Okay, motion by Tim
Second.
Black, second by Joe Zitzelberger. Any other comments? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Welcome, Brian, by the way. Hey, Chris?
Thank you very much.
Could we take something out of order? And that's out of the Waunakee Westport Joint Planning Commission. The attorney for the Drumlin Ridge Farm is here, but she also has to be at the Town Planning Commission at 7 o'clock.
Okay.
And so I think our discussion's gonna go quickly on this, so I think that way we can release her. Get to the meeting over at the town.
Okay, so we're having a public hearing on this, correct?
The joint plan is having
We
a
don't,
public
we
hearing.
don't.
We're
have
not
any.
having a public
Perfect,
hearing.
okay. Okay, so we're gonna put number 1 under our joint plan items, public hearing and discussion action on a request by Drumlin Ridge Farm Vineyards LLC to amend existing conditional use permit for 6,000 River Road. And we have our attorney here?
I'm here,
Oh,
and
there you are.
I came to answer questions if anyone had any questions at this level. I mean, I know we have a meeting tomorrow night, and we can certainly
Maybe in
respond to questions.
2 minutes, you could share with this commission, and we generally would defer to Westport on this, just in
Right.
terms, in general terms, what they're asking for.
Okay, can I just do it from here?
Yeah,
now?
absolutely.
They're really just asking for flexibility in their hours and occupancy. When they came before the committees in the first time several years ago, they had some neighbors that were very concerned that it was gonna be operated like a beer hall. And they felt compelled, in order to get the project approved, to sort of self-impose some restrictions that really weren't, it didn't come from law or anything else, just as a way of trying to show, give themselves the opportunity to show the community that they weren't a rowdy beer hall. They've been operating for a couple of years. They've had no complaints in terms of calls from law enforcement. They've had one neighbor call in a couple times about some incredibly minor things that they've addressed immediately. But they've had absolutely no issues or concerns otherwise. And at this time, they've been able to demonstrate that they're not a rowdy beer hall. They really are that rural winery that they opened and had hoped to convince the neighbors that they were. And so they thought it would be a good time now to come forward and say, hey, we just want to be able to be open like any other winery, that state law governs when they have to close anyway. And they just want to be able to enjoy the occupancy that their building was intended for, just like any other, business would want to do.
At the staff
I don't know if that
level,
was
we
2
don't have
minutes.
any concerns. In fact, this is really not an area that will affect village residents. It's an area that really affects that particular neighborhood in the town of Westport. And I know I've talked to Tom about it, and he's supportive. He did require, and you guys had a neighborhood meeting,
Yep.
trying to get at some of the issues if any of the neighbors had, and the generally, there was a lot of support for what they're proposing to do.
Okay. So we're just looking to give guidance to our joint plan members?
Yes, and I say our
I
guidance
say-
would be is point the other way.
We're good at that.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions?
No, I know this was a big point of contention a couple of years ago, and I've been out to a few of their larger events, and they're really,
They do a nice job.
do a great job. They're tuned about making sure that,
Yeah.
capacity's where it needs to be, and they've gone up and above, I believe, take care and respect the neighbors, so I'm anxious to meet tomorrow and give my favor.
Sounds good. Okay. All right, thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you.
We'll get you out of here.
Thanks.
All right, back then, status discussion on Woodland Crest and Hy-Vee development.
Brian will probably walk us through. Ann brought up a point regarding, two competing applications. But right now, we only have one complete application. We have had discussions with Festival Foods and the developer. They're not at a point where they can submit a full application, for your consideration. So at this point, we only have one application that would meet. It's not that we're certainly closing the door out, and we're open to it, and we continue to have conversations are ongoing, and certainly we want to be able to, if something doesn't go right with this project, that we can pick up where this one is and continue on, or if they come forward with a proposal that they want you to consider, we'll bring it to you. It's just we don't have it right now. So anything more on that before we turn this over to Brian?
Are we supposed to comment on that?
Well, why don't you let me give kind of the schedule that we're talking about related to the project that relates to Hy-Vee, and then I think it's certainly, it's, to the extent that it relates to the discussion that we're having on the Woodland Crest Hy-Vee development, I think that you can comment on it.
Okay.
If you all recall, June of 2018, I think it was actually over at the Village Center, Hy-Vee in particular, I think, made a presentation to the Plan Commission. I mean, there's a lot of approvals that are associated with this project. The land is currently in Westport, so ultimately it would have to be annexed. And so one of the things that we wanted to do tonight was just kind of bring you back up to speed on that project, because at your next meeting, we're anticipating having on the agenda, the deadline, the submission deadline, I think, is Friday of this week. And so what Forward Development Group / Hy-Vee are gonna have to submit to the village are the rezoning application, the land division, which I believe is gonna be a preliminary and final plat. We already have the annexation that's been submitted to us. And so and we did talk about, and comments were made by the Plan Commission to Forward Development Group back in June of 2018 on the general zoning for the site and on the preliminary plat. And then there were also comments that were made to Hy-Vee on their site plan. And my recollection was, and I think we also talked about this at a technical staff meeting, and then we shared some information with both Forward Development Group and with Hy-Vee. Hy-Vee's site plan was pretty close to being done. There were some comments, if you were to go back and look at the packet for the June 2018 Plan Commission meeting, if you looked at staff comments related to the Hy-Vee site plan, there weren't that many comments. And so I think what Hy-Vee is doing at this point is they are going back in light of a meeting that we had with them more recently, and they're looking at those comments, and they're going to try to provide certainly a complete site plan by Friday, and hopefully one that we'll review, but there wouldn't be any comments on it because they would have answered all the comments that were back in June of 2018. Similar process is for Forward Development Group. They're going to be coming forward with a zoning application, hopefully by Friday, and a preliminary plat. And so when you look at that project, and then if they get everything in by Friday, then for the March 11th Village Plan Commission meeting, you would have for consideration, and what you would be doing at that point would be making a recommendation to the village board on the preliminary and final plat, on the zoning, on the annexation ordinance. Now, the one thing that I haven't mentioned yet is that would be on your agenda for March 11th would be there has been a request for TIF assistance related to the project, and specifically related to the public improvements that need to be constructed for the project. And so there would be something on your agenda for the March 11th Plan Commission meeting related to the potential creation of a TIF district out there. Then, because this is in the joint planning area, the land division and the zoning would go to the joint plan meeting on March 12th. The next step in the schedule is April 1st Village Board meeting, where there'd be a lot of things related to this project on the Village Board agenda. The annexation, the land division, the general zoning, the potential creation of a TIF district, and we've anticipated 4 different agreements associated with this project. The next step after that is Hy-Vee, the site plan for Hy-Vee would not be coming to you on March 11th. It would be coming in the April meeting, because we think before we address a site plan and then the specific implementation plan that relates to the development, we need the village board to approve the PUD general development zoning. And so we want to have that discussion first before we would have the site plan discussion at the April Village Plan Commission meeting and the April Joint Plan Commission meeting. And then to top it all off, you have to, if you're gonna create a TIF, you gotta go to a joint review board. And so some point after the April 1st village board meeting, if the TIF does move forward at that point, you'd have to have a joint review board meeting. So that's a lot of information, I know. Basically, we've mapped out a schedule. And I can tell you the reason why we've mapped out the schedule in this fashion is these public improvements that we've talked about. I think one of them is signalized intersections at Woodland Drive and Simon Crestway, completion of Simon Crestway from Peaceful Valley Parkway to Woodland Drive, and some other public improvements. Village staff has been very clear with both Forward Development Group and Hy-Vee that it is critical that those improvements get done in 2019 if this project is going to move forward. And so that's why we've kind of mapped out a schedule on the front end to make sure that we can hit the construction schedule for the public improvements. And, you know, so the first step is making sure that they get everything that they need to get to us by Friday, and then we will go through the normal evaluation process. When it comes to the zoning, I think that our typical practice has been, even though we don't have to have a public hearing at the Plan Commission level on a zoning request, we have had it. The statutory public hearing for the rezoning request would be at the April 1st Village Board meeting. There are certainly public hearings that are associated with the creation of a TIF too. So there would be, you know, I'm just looking at the schedule here. We're talking about this right now. We're going to update the Joint Plan Commission tomorrow night on the proposed schedule. Then we have March 11th, March 12th, Village Plan Commission and Joint Plan Commission meetings, potentially April 1st Village Board meeting, then April 9th, 8th, and 9th Plan Commission meetings again on the site plan for Hy-Vee, and then at some point in time, a joint review board meeting if it advances that far for TIF creation. So there's going to be a lot of public meetings and a lot of public hearings on everything, you know, all of everything that's going to have to come to you.
So are they gonna meet the deadline Friday?
That we've been told that they will. I mean, we've tried to, they've been very, I think they've been working really hard. We gave them, I don't want to call it a long list, but definitely things that needed to be changed in the preliminary plat. And when it comes to the zoning, I think that when conceptually we're in agreement with them. And if you were to go back to that packet that they provided, or the submittal that they provided for the June Plan Commission meeting, really what the zoning is going to be at this point is it's going to be a planned unit development district for the entire land. The only land that would be rezoned right now, though, would be the land for the Hy-Vee lot, and then there would be 2 commercial lots across the street on Sarah Lane. Those would be zoned as part of the planned unit development district right now. The rest of the land, when it gets annexed, would be put into our agricultural holding district, which, for example, if you look at the Woodland West developments on the west side of Kew, that land has already been annexed, the land that's kind of across the street from this proposed development in the Dean Clinic. That land is currently in the agricultural zoning district, which per our code, we bring it in unless we know exactly what the zoning's going to be. So for the Hy-Vee lot, it would be zoned 1 permitted use, grocery store and a related attached convenience store. We'd have some zoning for those 2 other commercial lots. And everybody's on board with that. At this point, we've told them what we'd like to see is a general development plan that is consistent in format with the Kilkenny Commons general development plan, because that really lays everything out. And I think it's going to make it easier for you all to read when it does come to you. But I do think that we're in pretty good shape, and we've been told that they will be able to hit that deadline on Friday.
Other questions for Brian? Brad, anything?
No, a lot of moving parts going on here. It looks like they've really started running, once they heard.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that they did a lot of work last year. I mean, if you were to go back and look at the packet in the June meeting, especially the Hy-Vee lot, they were, if other things had been in order, I think that the site plan at that point was probably ready to be conditionally approved. It's just that we didn't want to approve a site plan when we didn't have the general development plan approved yet. And then I think just because of construction schedules and things of that nature, there was not an urgency from their standpoint to push things forward after that June meeting. We started having conversations, I would say, again with them in probably October. And that's kind of ramped up to this, to where now we put forward, we thought about this schedule. And I wouldn't even call it aggressive, because there's been so much planning that's been put together for this schedule. I would reiterate, though, that the primary reason why we've put this schedule together is it's critically important for this project to move forward. We got to get those public improvements in 2019.
So the TIF is gonna be not directed, because the land costs are high, the TIF is gonna be directed toward utilities and laterals?
What we've told them is, so when you have a TIF project plan, you have to identify what the project costs are gonna be. We have been very clear with them that the only project costs are going to be specific public improvement costs. And I think there's 5 of them. One of them is the signalized costs associated with the signalized intersection at Woodland and Simon Crestway.
That's the high school entrance.
Yes. The extent, they have to build Simon Crestway from Woodland Drive down to Peaceful Valley Parkway. They have to do all of Sarah Lane. So Sarah Lane is going to be a road that goes from County Highway Q to Simon Crestway, kind of in the middle of their development. There are bike and pedestrian trail improvements that they have to do on the north side of Peaceful Valley Parkway that's adjacent to their land. And then they have to extend the water main under County Highway Q from their property to the west. And those are the only costs that, as we've talked about this process, we said those are the only costs that we're going to allow, to be identified within the project plan as a recovery. And we've told them that even though those costs will likely be greater than $2 million, the amount would be capped at $2 million. And since we're talking about the TIF, I think the other thing that's important to mention is the TIF district would only be the Hy-V lot and a multifamily, a small lot intended for multifamily development on the east side of Simon Crestway. We've told them from the start, there's no way that all of this land would go into a TIF. It's going to be a very focused TIF, with the idea being, one, we want the grocery store, but we need the public improvements. So the TIF would go for the public improvements. And there's potential, a lot of other development then within that area that would not be in a TIF district, that would benefit all of the taxing jurisdictions as soon as it gets developed. I mean, that's the rationale for only having 2 parcels within the TIF district.
Okay. Chris?
No questions.
Joe?
No, very comprehensive.
Brian?
Good.
Do you want to talk about the mechanics of the TIF at all, or is that inappropriate at this time?
Well, I mean, I think it's probably just, I'm not exactly sure what the schedule is going to be. I know that the schedule is going to have to kind of, any schedule for TIF creation is going to have to work along with the schedule that we talked about for approvals.
Plan commission was part of that process.
Yeah, for certainly, the plan commission is going
Project
to be part
plan
of it.
has to be reviewed and approved by the plan commission.
Yeah, plan commission is involved. It goes, plan commission, village board, joint review board are all involved in the process.
Okay. Is there something that we can post for the public so they know the process very clearly? Or is that inappropriate too?
As long as we can, if we want to, as long as I think depending on who's going to be in attendance, we may have to post a statutory notice if it's going to be a governmental meeting. But, back in 2018, when when staff was suggesting changes to the zoning code, we did have some open meetings that were noticed, and they weren't meetings of a village governmental body, but it was village staff trying to provide information to the public. And so if that's something that the village wants to happen, I'm sure it can happen in this instance too.
I think it's appropriate for us to make sure the public is aware of this process. As you described it, it was pretty quick. A lot of people are probably going, how that's going. If
Yeah.
we can put that down, that people can see that.
I think we can do that. I mean, just to be clear, we don't even have a draft project plan at this point, so I think we can definitely do that. But it would be, I'm thinking, earlier March or right at the end of February that something like it would happen. We'd want to have that draft project plan in place, I think, before we could talk about the TIF
Okay.
in more detail.
Okay. Do you guys want to comment any further? I don't know if it's appropriate for us to be talking about the festival part of it.
Well, I think
Meeting, so I just want to make sure, because
I think the way that Kevin described it
I've
is,
noticed, and I don't wanna-
is the best way to describe it. We don't actually have a proposal yet. And so I know that the Festival Foods, I think they came to the Plan Commission and to the Village Board and made a proposal, and so that's definitely out there. I do believe that the individual from Festival Foods, whether it was at the Plan Commission meeting or the Village Board meeting, indicated that he believed that you could only have one additional grocery store. And it's really difficult to evaluate and compare whatever festival is proposing to do with Hy-Vee because we don't have a formal proposal yet. I think once, assuming that we do get a formal proposal, then it's without question, it's going to be appropriate for, that to be taken into consideration as you move through this process. And it's just difficult to comment on it when you don't actually have the proposal yet.
correct. So they've indicated that they want to be here as well. I would say that the mechanics of what we're going through with regards to Hy-Vee, as you described them, there's a lot of moving parts to it still. There could be something that sidetracks it. Maybe they decide they want to pull out, whatever could happen, and having somebody else here as a potential is a good thing for us. So if they do propose it, we'll have that opportunity to vet what they would like. So, okay? Okay. Anybody else have any other questions in regards to this? Brian, good job. All right, next we've got our Waunakee Westport joint plan items. We already did number 1, so number 2, public hearing and discussion action and request by Wisconsin Land to extend the original conditional use permit for Highway M for an additional 2 years.
Every other year, they're required to come back to the Joint Planning Commission, and I know I talked to Tom about it. He's going to recommend that they extend it. We haven't really had any issues with them. Things are going fine.
Okay?
People, I think, wonder if they're even open.
Okay. Next, we've got Westport Commercial Development Design Guidelines.
Yeah, these are design guidelines that their plan commission actually put together. They have an architect and an engineer on their plan commission, and the two of those guys work together in order to put these guidelines together. It's rather long. It's 150 pages plus. Very well done. It goes into what they were looking for in terms of what scale of development, type of development. They want the nautical feeling down along by the Skipper Buds. They want a business development out on the 113 and River Road. And they have potential, they want to have some connecting trails. They have that in there. It's a pretty lengthy, I know you guys didn't have it in the packet because you have to download it, but it was pretty well done. I don't think it has much impact on the village. All their areas are certainly concentrating on the core parts of Westport and really minimal, if any, impact on the village.
Questions? Okay. Then we've got status discussion on Woodland, okay, we just had this. So we need to go on to that. One more motion.
Move to adjourn?
Motion by Joe to adjourn, second by Brian. All the question, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.